All right, welcome to Closers Are Losers. My name is Jeremy Miner, the chairman of 7th Level and the host of Closers Are Losers. Now, today I'm with a special guest. I am with our COO of the company, Mr. James Sackl, all the way in our Sydney, Australia office. James, how are you doing out there, man?
Just holding down the fort here today, filling in for Matt while he's on holidays. So hopefully I can come on and part some wisdom today.
Just holding down the fort in the conference room that I have not seen. We opened up this office, 4, 5, 6 months ago, and have not been there since COVID because we can't get into your country. I hope it opens up one of these decades.
Well, you can get in. You just get stuck in quarantine for a very significant amount of time, making it not worth it.
Come to the office, I just have to stay there a few months.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we've got James filling in for Matt, our CEO. Matt's on holiday, like James had mentioned, and we wanted to do something a little bit different for you. Now, if you're brand new to the show, I am the founder and chairman of 7th Level, and we're an organization that runs this podcast. We help sales professionals just like you, so salespeople, coaches, sales executives, leaders, managers, business owners, and we help you by transforming the way you and your team sell by learning specific skilled questions and techniques that work with human behavior rather than against it. We're going to talk a lot about that today. These are known as neuro-emotional persuasion questions with the right tonality that puts the prospects at ease, eliminates sales pressure, and get the prospect to actually persuade themselves. So, James, you come from a very unique background here because I know you run the day-to-day, the business side of the company, but you're a pretty good salesperson as well. You're NEPQ certified.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the certification is really exciting, like next step in business for us. My background was in elite athlete performance. So it's really been my job is to make sure all of our guys are turning up every day and are in the best space possible to go out and close deals. And you're right. Yeah, I used to do sales very heavily with Matthew. We had a lot of businesses together in the past, and he was always a better salesperson than me, had a lot more reps.
Yeah.
And I was a lot better with many other things. So got off the phones so I could run the business side of stuff and make sure, everyone's performing, everyone's doing their job. So I haven't actively been doing sales for a very, very, very long time, which is really good because it offers up a different perspective because it's something I'm not actively doing, but do jump onto a lot of, B2B calls and are involved heavily in a lot of the negotiation side of things. Because, you train so many people, like even just looking through the testimonials, it's quite ridiculous with NEPQ. How many there is?
There's only 2,987 to be exact as of this morning. The first 2 years.
Is that all?
I know it should be like 20,000, but
it really should be.
Who's counting over the first 2 years?
Yeah, so I've compiled a big list of questions from a lot of people in those videos making those testimonials that would like some more details on some specific things. So we'll just go through this conversation today. I'll rattle off a few of those.
And I knew you were going to do this because you're like, hey, we're going to roll it up. We're going to do something different. I know a lot of people like Q&A stuff. So I think this is golden for the podcast today. We're going to do a little bit different than Matt and I do, of course, or other guest speakers. And this is just like questions that various clients, or maybe even somebody that's not even a client, has emailed us in or, posted on one of our Facebook ads or somewhere. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah. So I think, you mentioned like what NEPQ was a few minutes ago. I'm really curious. This is one personally from me. I'm going to be a little bit selfish and start with myself because I'm curious, like from you going from like that door-to-door knocking and developing NEPQ, I've always wondered like how many reiterations of those specific questions, like did you go through in that process of building that system? And, how many times did you go back and say, that didn't work. I need to change this. I need to change that. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, that's where, as a lot of that have been on our podcast or, in our training or in some of our Facebook groups know that the way I developed NEPQ was 2 ways. So I started off as a door-to-door salesperson in college, like a lot of people do, commission-only jobs, selling home security systems. Company gave me a script, read a couple books by, the old sales gurus and, go make a bunch of money. But I quickly found that using those techniques a lot of times would trigger sales resistance and trigger objections, right? Now, at the same time, as you know, and a lot of people know, in college, I was studying behavioral science and human psychology. Okay, that's what I studied in, okay? And so I started to see from what I was studying and like really honing in from behavioral science and human psychology, the way our brains make decisions and how and why somebody is persuaded and or not persuaded was over here. But what most of the sales gurus were teaching were completely over here. It was like the opposite of what human psychology was teaching me. And I was like, I couldn't put that in my mind. I'm like, psychology teaches here's how human beings make decisions. Sales training teaches this way. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, putting pressure on them, manipulating them, posturing them, or maybe asking consultative questions that were just getting logic. Like, it didn't make any sense. So I started implementing human behavior, human psychology into that sales process. And as you know, that's where NEPQ started to come about. Now, was it perfected month number 1? No. Was it perfected first year? No. I still became the top salesperson in that entire company. And by the second year was the top person in the entire country in that industry, probably using about 20% of what NEPQ is now. Okay. And one of the funny thing is, and this is kind of interesting, in the process where we go from connecting questions to situation questions to problem awareness to solution awareness to consequence. Well, I used to have consequence questions after problem awareness.
Okay.
And then I did solution awareness questions, and that worked pretty good. Like I said, I was the number 1 rep in the entire country in my industry at probably about 20,000 salespeople. Okay. So that worked really well. But I noticed as I got into other industries and like the B2B space and more complex selling, it didn't work quite as well. So then I had to make the shift and start focusing on problem awareness to solution awareness, where in solution awareness, I got them to start seeing what their objective state or what their future was going to look like once these problems were solved, and then jerked it away with the consequence questions. I'm like, wow, that works so much better. And that was like in 2009, 10, 11 range. And that's when my income like doubled.
Okay.
It just doubled overnight. So there's been adjustments that I've made throughout the years, but the perfected version probably has been the same since about 2016.
Okay.
A few tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty good.
Do you see any like future tweaks and like have an idea of where it's going to be in,
Well, there's always tweaks with me. There's always tweaks with me. I am a person that is ever learning, because if you're not learning, you're just regressing, right? Like you're gonna stall. So there's always new things I'm developing and like different ways to ask certain questions in different environments that will always improve every single month, every single year. So that will never change. Now, the structure of NEPQ, I would say, is probably not going to change much, but the variant questions inside the structure will always be tweaked depending on the industry of those clients are in.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned sales resistance. Is that a word that you've adopted and come up with yourself, or is it
I
borrowed from somewhere?
I had never really heard many sales trainers say that. I do have a good friend. I have a good friend that says that in one of his books that came out a year ago. Mark Wayshak has a game plan selling book, which is really good. But I'm not sure if he got it from me, because I've been saying that since about 2000, since about 2006, 2007. I actually became the vice president of sales for a company that went public a while ago that sold for like $2.2 billion. Now, this was about 8 years. They went public about 8 years after I was there. If I was still there, I would have made like 30 million. So I might not even be on this call right now. So as far as that, I started doing really the training for the entire company. And I came up with like, hey, people are always resisting you when you use like the option close or when you use the invitational close. Like they know what you're doing, like you're too assumptive, and it's triggering resistance. And then I later tagged on as triggering sales resistance. And that's kind of where the term, for me anyway, sales resistance came from. Now, does somebody else in the world say that too? I'm sure there are.
Probably,
but for me, that's kind of how we came up with it.
Okay. And for the guys that, that may be sort of like new to NEPQ and are just exploring it, like how do you define it?
How do I define NEPQ? In what way?
Sales resistance, sorry. Like what exactly does that mean? And then my follow-on question to that is like, what are the warning signs of when you've elicited it?
Okay. So sales resistance, let me go back. Okay. So in the first 10 seconds, sometimes even sooner, but let's just say 10 seconds to be safe, of any sales interaction, whether that's B2B, whether that's door to door, whether that's B2C, whether that's on Zoom or Skype, whether that's in person in a boardroom meeting or in a home, it doesn't really matter. if it's in, virtual or in person, within the first 10 seconds, your prospects psychologically, this is the way our brains work, are picking up on cues based on your tonality and what you are saying and or asking that triggers their brain to react in one of two ways. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have the right questions, if you're just talking and excited, it triggers, for the most part, them to be more cautious and try to get rid of you. Like that triggers sales resistance, like what's going on? So like it triggers cautiousness, it triggers skepticism, and all they do is try to get rid of you. Now, if you do, that's sales resistance. Now, if you do know what you're doing, you know the right questions to ask, it triggers their brain on the opposite end to become so curious that they feel like they want to engage with you, like they have to engage with you. Otherwise, they're missing out something that could be very important to them. So sales resistance is something that is typically triggered. So our job as sales professionals is to know what questions to ask and what to say that disarms that sales resistance or that sales pressure from them. Another word you could use, sales pressure, although sales resistance is a reaction. Sales pressure is just how they feel.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that feeling when, you go into the supermarket and there's those guys standing out the front with the charity and, hey, do you have a minute to talk about this? It's like, oh, sorry, I'm in a rush. Like that immediate reaction. But you're like, oh, no, I don't want to talk. Like you always using these tactics. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
It's because do they say, do you have 2 minutes to talk? Or let's say that you want to buy, it's cold in Australia right now. So you're like, oh man, I need a coat. Yeah. So you go into the store to look at coats. Like it's cold. You want a coat. And the clerk comes over and says, hey, how can I help you? Oh, just looking.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a knee-jerk question. And so you give a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
So instead, to maybe disarm that, when somebody comes in the store, I might say, hey, happy to have you in the store. Are you guys out just looking around today? So I disarm that objection because they're like, yeah, I'm just looking. Oh, okay. Do you guys know what you're looking for?
Yeah. Oh, right.
You see how that works? So it's redirecting that where it disarms the sales resistance because I just said, hey guys, nice having the store. Are you guys just out looking around today? So there's no resistance. They're not going to say, oh, just looking. Because I told them, I said, hey, are you guys just out looking around today?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, we're just out looking. Okay, do you know what you're looking for?
Yeah, so when you're the sales guy and you've put that there, you've created some sales resistance. What do you do to draw that back and get them back online?
Well, it depends on if it's the first part of the call, the middle part of the call, the end of the call, or give me an example.
Let's just use that example. It's like, hey, how can I help you today? When I'm in the store looking for coats, it's like, just looking, like what would you do there?
I would probably, first of all, I would like not say that. So it wouldn't trigger resistance because that's going to help you. But if in that case, if you're like, because that's retail, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, not a problem. I'm pretty busy with some other stuff, so I don't have much time. But do you know what you're looking for, possibly? So I want to detach myself. Well, yeah, it's not a It's not a problem. I'm pretty busy over here, anyways. So I don't have much time. But do you know what you're possibly looking for? That would be a way to rebound that because I'm detaching myself by saying, oh, I'm pretty busy over here, so I don't have much time. So that means you're not going to go bother them. So they let their guard down a little bit. That's how I would want to rebound if you messed up in the beginning, if you're selling retail or something.
Right. Okay. And after like you developed NEPQ, you got the ball rolling, you started making, $1 million years in commissions, plus a lot more than that. How did you know that you've made it? And a lot of that, if we take sales aside, was talent and not luck. Because I know a lot of our guys, they get on a call, they close a deal and they're like, oh, was that person just maybe going to buy regardless? Is there anything that I actually did that facilitated that? And sometimes they feel like they're a little bit lucky. So like, when did you realize it was talent and you had something there that can be disseminated and used to train people to a far better standard than what we have now? Like, when was that talent, not luck?
Let me answer that question twofold. So first of all, the way you know if what you're doing is working is by comparing yourself to the conversions of everybody else in your company, right? Yeah. So if I'm closing at this percentage, and when I got up to, my first year that I made 7 figures in commissions in 1 year was 2008, 2009. I think it was 2009. It was like right after the crash.
Yeah.
Everybody's income dropped in half. My income like doubled. People are like, what the hell are you doing? It's same industry. So I just compared myself like, okay, I made $1.1 million this year in commissions. The guy that was in second place out of the, 4,000 reps in our company made, 350,000. And then everybody else was like 250, 150, 80, 40. The average guy made 45,000. So if the average guy's making 45,000 a year and I'm making twice that every month, what does that tell me? That tells me that what I'm doing works a lot better than anybody else. Now, so that's how you have to compare yourself. So if you're in a sales organization and there's 10 other reps, well, it's hard to say because in 10 reps, you might think you're doing awesome, but you're not really doing that great because everybody else sucks.
Yeah.
But if you're in a bigger organization, if you're in a bigger organizations like I was that had thousands, hundreds or thousands of salespeople, you really compare yourself based on stats. So let's say that if you're, let's say if you're in like high ticket closing or whatever, just as an example as an industry, and let's say you've only got 5 people in your company, because that could be, let's say you sell real estate and there's 5 other salespeople. You don't only want to compare yourself to them, you want to compare yourself to other industry reps and ask them what their conversions are, like how much are they making? Hopefully they're honest with you, okay? Now, to answer that question the second time, I don't think I've ever felt that I've arrived, and that's what drives me to produce more. That's what drives me to learn more and get better, because the moment you feel you've arrived, you're just going to be stuck there or go backwards, because your ego gets so big that you feel that you know everything and that there's nothing else you can learn. And then you'll just stay stagnant. So with me, I always am like, I never feel like I've mastered the art of sales and persuasion, even though some people on the outside are like, this guy's the number one salesperson in the world that's ever sold or whatever. I've had some people say that. I doubt that's true. But for me, like I have to keep improving. I have to keep being better. That's why I read 3 books a month. That's why I go through coaching programs. That's why a lot of stuff I learn is just crap, but I'll redo it and make it way better for our clients to help them. And so you have to be ever learning and realize that you've never arrived, because the moment you've think you're arrived, that's kind of where you're going to stop at.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Thanks. Like for you growing up, you didn't have a life of luxury. And then all of a sudden in a very short period of time,
Yeah.
making $1 million a year in commissions. Was there's something that you had as a child, like a dream as a child that you always believed that, when you haven't arrived, but you're close enough that you would buy? Like, what was that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't think anybody's really ever asked me that. And I think that's good for my background. So really what drove me for a long period of my sales career is I was going away from the fear of being poor. And the reason why that was is because I grew up in a middle-class home, okay? And when I was about 11, my stepdad got lupus, like an inner ear disease, and he became disabled. And so we immediately went from just middle class. We weren't wealthy or anything. I mean, we're just average middle class, had a little home, 2 cars, like paid for groceries. It wasn't like we were just living an exotic life. Our vacation was driving an hour away every summer for 3 days for a vacation,
Yeah.
So it's probably like lower middle class. But instantly when he lost his job and became disabled, he made a third of what he made. And so we instantly became poor and broke and on like government assistance. And I was like 11 or 12, like I was going into my teenage years. So that's a crucial period in a teenager's life. And so I remember going to like baseball practice one day. And I remember like my parents couldn't afford to buy the Nikes and the Adidas cleats anymore. And they had to buy me like these cleats from Walmart that were like $10. And I remember how embarrassed as a kid I felt, because all my friends had these nice cleats on and just awesome stuff. And I was like, you would make fun of somebody if they wore cleats from Walmart over here in the United States.
I remember those old days.
not to say that it's good, but just kids are kids. And so I remember from that moment, I felt so embarrassed. I felt so like a lack of confidence at that point, that it was like something in my mind said, you were never going to be poor again. Like, I'm not kidding. That was my landmark moment. Have you ever been to like Landmark Forum?
No, I have not.
Landmark Forum is a big like personal development event. It's very similar to Tony Robbins, but it's more smaller. They only let like 100 people in at a time. And it's like a 5-day class. It's like intense from like 8 in the morning to like midnight. It's crazy.
I've probably been to similar
Yeah, you learn a lot about what drives you and why you are who you are and what conditioned you as a child, like causes you to do certain things in your adult life, right? And so that was triggered my path to success in the beginning.
Gotcha.
And the problem is that as I started making $1 million a year in commissions, and then 2 years later I made like 1.8 million in commissions, and then in 2012 I made 2.5 million in commissions, and 2014 it was like 2.9. It's pretty much 3 million a year in commissions. Until I went to that landmark forum and figured out why I was driven, I was always afraid of being poor. Even though I was a millionaire at that time, I was actually pretty much a multi-millionaire at that time. Even though I had all this money and everybody thought I was Donald Trump, the richest guy in the world in sales, I still felt driven to succeed more because I felt like I was going to lose it all. And that's not something you want to be in, because I always make decisions based on, I'm going to lose this money. And so Landmark Forum helped me realize that, look, if I lose all this money, none of that really matters because I have the skill sets necessary to get all of it back and more. And that made me flip on a different switch and make better decisions based on, instead of a fear of loss, more of like an opportunity of gain. That kind of took me to an even higher level than that.
Yeah, to bring a mindset, particularly like for building a career. So just touching on that, like, what's the mindset that you take into every call?
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't done sales calls for a while, but when I was doing sales calls all the way up until really 2017, almost 2018, before we started Seventh Level, the mindset of every call for me is, before I call that person or before I get on Zoom, I look at that name and I just think like, okay, this person has problems.
Yeah.
And I'm here to probably solve those problems for them. But I'm first going to help them find what those problems are. And I'm going to help them find it in their own mind. And that's going to cause them to be open to having me help them solve those problems. So I literally look at the name and like almost visualize that name. And I swear when I do that, people answer the phone so much more than I would just randomly call numbers. Like it was just I don't know what it was. I don't know if it's like the universe speaking to that person on the phone to pick up. But it seemed like when I would look at the name just for 3 or 4 seconds and like, okay, this Sally lady has problems. Like she probably needs my help. And so I came into that call more detached, more relaxed, more what I call collective confidence, rather than just calling to get it over with.
Yeah.
People just react to you in a different way. When you're open to them, they become open to you.
Yeah, it seems like a high level of conviction in what you're saying, because I imagine that you believe that when you get on a call, you have the opportunity to help change someone's life by persuasion, right? Okay.
Well, I realized that if I can't help them find problems they didn't think they had, and if I can't help them see, here's where their current situation is, here's where they want to be, their objective state, current state, objective state. If I can't help them see all the gaps in between from here to get to there with all these problems, then that's my fault. And that means they're not going to purchase what I'm offering. That means they're going to stay in status quo, and they're not going to get their problem solved, and nothing's ever going to change for them. And whose responsibility? Absolutely. That's mine, not theirs.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we have very, very similar ideologies before even meeting about sales. And I found that, like, from my personal view, whether that's right or wrong, it's an opinion and I'm entitled to one. So I found that, like, the biggest problem in the sales industry is people don't have that same perception of going onto a call to try and solve a problem and help someone. It's usually a big commission breath, and people are getting on those calls to purely one thing only, is to make money. So that's what I see as the biggest problem. What do you feel is the biggest problem in the sales industry right now?
I think the bigger problem is that salespeople still use techniques that go against human behavior, that trigger sales resistance, that are too assumptive, that are biased. And when you come into the call biased, you think the prospect can pick up on that? For sure. Just like you said, they feel the commission breath automatically. Even when a lot of salespeople are like, I'm more consultative, I'm asking some consultative questions. Okay, yeah, you're asking 3 or 4 questions, then you go into your pitch. That they know what you're doing. Like, that doesn't help, okay? So I think it's the use techniques that are outdated, that work against human behavior. They don't understand what the buying process is as far as from the buyer's perspective, right? They just think from the seller's perspective. So, like our good friend Jerry Acuff, that I'm writing this new book that'll be published this fall, says, the CEO of Delta Point, He's got a book out that says, stop acting like a seller and start thinking like a buyer. That's extremely true. Stop acting like a seller and start thinking like a buyer. And when you're able to do that and you know the right questions to ask at the right time with the right tonality in that conversation, people start to pull you in. Rather than you try to push them in, they're pulling you in. I mean, they are chasing after you. And that doubles your commissions. That triples your commissions. That's when you become so good at the art of selling and persuasion. You can, if you don't like the sales job you're in, you can go anywhere and anybody's going to hire you, pay you way more. And you have the skill that most people have never dedicated themselves to learning. And so you get to do anything you want.
Yeah, it's funny. I bought a new bed on the weekend and then went into an extra store and bought some pillows. I was trying on the pillows and man, this sales rep was terrible. I'm like,
all right,
well,
you got to tell us what happened.
So it was just like all the common signs, like didn't care about the prospect, was rushing. I'm like, I want exactly this pillow. Like, where do I find it on the shelf? Just tell it like, this is the one I want. Show me where it is. He's like asking me all those questions that just had no relation to anything. I'm like, look, bro, I just want this pillow. I like it. This is the one I want. It's not the most expensive. It's not the cheapest. It's the middle of the range because it feels better to me. Like, that's what I want. And anyway, we get to the counter and he goes, okay, so will that be Visa or MasterCard? I'm like, oh, I'm trying not to school him. So I looked him dead in the eye and just went, Amex, just to mess with him a bit. It was good fun. But yeah, I find myself like these days, anytime I'm in a sales situation where I'm the buyer,
yeah,
I can't switch off from going, that was terrible. You shouldn't have said that. Let's take it back. This is how you should be doing it. And yeah, it's crazy how many bad salespeople there is that you encounter when you know what to look for.
No, I know it's hard. Like, I bought a new vehicle about 5-6 months ago and I went to like 4 or 5 different car dealerships and I was just looking for this specific type of BMW. It's a 7 Series, this type of BMW. So I literally went around to a BMW dealership that actually had a salesperson that actually asked me more than one question about what I was looking for. And I bought from that person, even though he wasn't that good. He was about 10 times better than the other 3 or 4 guys that I talked to that were just so bad. And I'm like, dude, I'm buying like $125,000 car and you just hop in and show me what's underneath the hood and how much I'm going to like it and how it's great. And you've got the greatest deal since sliced bread. I'm like, dude, you didn't even ask me what I was looking for.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Why I was looking for it,
Yeah, more importantly, right? I actually didn't buy my car from where I test drove it.
Tell us about that. What happened?
Because I went in and said, all right, this is what I want to buy. I was just very Australian, dressed in my flannelette shirt, not wearing a watch or anything, just on a day off after I'd come out of the gym. I'm like, okay, I'm going to test drive this. I'm going to buy one. I looked at it. They're like, oh, do you want finance? I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, we've got that sorted. Okay, I'm just going to make a couple of calls. I know what color I want. So I'm going to get back to you with the exact model. Like, I'll email it through to you today of what we're looking for. And then I'll come in. We're just waiting on like our accounts to go through, and then I'll buy it next week.
Yeah.
They didn't respond to my email, didn't follow me up. So I went about 15 minutes to the next dealership, walked in and said, this is what I want. Tell me when it's available and send me an invoice and I'll pay the deposit today. And they went, okay. I'm like, done. Like, that's what happens when you don't follow up. You lose people. And I purely didn't buy it for the fact that, like, I'm not rewarding their mediocrity of not doing their job properly. So why should I?
I cannot reward horrible salespeople. Like, I cannot. Like, you have to be even average for. It's just I can't do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I imagine it's like worse for you because you're so much on a high level with mastery in your sales ability to just like look at these things, and you would probably notice like far more detailed little things that, it must get aggravating.
You can't use that. I'm like, dude, you can't use the opt-in close on me, man. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. I got a couple of technical questions. What do you specifically look for to know when is the right time to interrupt someone?
Well, when I'm asking a question, like if I'm asking a closing, like a commitment question, I don't like the word closing, as you know, so NEPQ committing questions. Do you feel like this could be the answer for you? Yeah, I do. Well, hold on. Why do you feel like it is though? So let's say, yeah, I do because, well, hold on. Why do you feel like it is though? So you interrupt when you're probing and they start to expand on their answers. And when you interrupt and you focus on them, this is the key. You can never interrupt a conversation and then focus on you or talk about your solution. Otherwise, you're dead because they will be offended.
Mm-hmm.
But when they started talking, because so like in that, when we either, there's a couple different circumstances. When you probe and they start to expand, I'll interrupt typically with another clarifying or probing question on that. And that gets them to expand their emotion even more. And if I'm in the first part of a call and I'm asking situation questions and they start to waffle and they just go off on a tangent, I want to bring that back in because it's not helping them or me understand their situation. Okay. So let's say if I sold Amazon training, we train a lot of companies in that space, just giving an example. Okay. And one of my first situation questions, I'm going to ask them, okay, so what do you do for a living now? Or what do you do for work? Because I need to find out what they're doing now because they're trying to start an Amazon business, right? To leave their job, right? That's why they want to. And they say, oh, I'm a fireman. And, I was back in the military and, 27 years ago. And then I got married and then my dog got shot and it was just a horrible time for me. And then, I got married to this new girl and they start going off. You cannot just sit there and listen to that for 10 minutes. Your calls are too long. You're just killing yourself. Okay, yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. But what I was asking that for, like, how long have you actually been doing the job you're at now, though? Not what you've done in the past. Like, what are you doing now for a living? And that gets them focused on now. Okay. So I'm going to have a pattern interrupt with a question that's asking them another question to get them to redirect back to where we need to go to find out what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And developing tonality, right? So I find like when new sales reps, well, more particularly new sales reps, they come onto the scene and they're reading from a script. They're very monotone, and I was extremely monotone when I first started it and sometimes fall into that habit of continuously doing it as well as mumble and whatnot. So I guess where I'm going with that question is like, how do you teach guys to develop that tonality so they aren't coming across monotone and the conversation becomes more engaging?
Yeah. Well, the easiest analogy I can give to all of our listeners is imagine that you're a Hollywood actor or you're a Hollywood actress. Okay. Who's your favorite Hollywood actor or actress? Mine is George Clooney. I love George Clooney. I love his films, right? So when you watch George Clooney or whoever your favorite one, Brad Pitt, whoever it is, I don't care. Okay. When you watch them, everything they say, for the most part, is 100% scripted. Does everybody know that? They don't just walk in there and just start talking something like, oh, that sounds really good. Let's record that, right? Like it's all scripted and it's rehearsed. And when you watch them though, even though they're 100% scripted, do they sound scripted?
Not at all.
Sounds natural. You don't even view George Clooney as George Clooney in that film. You view him as the character he's playing, right?
Yeah.
That's because his lines are all memorized and it sounds natural. So in selling, salespeople don't memorize their lines. They don't memorize the questions they're going to ask. And when they get out there, let's say if they're selling from home or in their office and they're on Zoom, they've got their script there and they're just reading it. Or if they're going door to door in a boardroom meeting, they don't have them memorized. So they forget certain questions and don't even ask them, or they ask them the wrong way. So tonality can only be practiced once you've memorized the questions. And then we work on what's called verbal pausing, because there's going to be some sentences or questions that we ask where we're going to pause. Like if I'm asking a problem awareness question to, let's say, go back to that same industry, Amazon coaching or whatever, if we sell Amazon training, I'm going to ask them, do they like what they do now for a living? I'm not going to ask that way. I'm going to say, so this job that you've had the last 17 years, do you like what you're doing for a living? Now, why do I want to have that pause between like and then what they already are doing?
To give them space to think about.
Yeah, that pause helps the person on the other end think deeper about the question I'm asking. Because if I just say, so you've had this job for 17 years, do you like what you're doing for a living? Yeah, I like it. It's pretty good. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. So because the question is a knee-jerk question. It doesn't get them to think about what you're asking. So tonality is taught once you memorize the questions. And in our NEPQ Advanced 3.0 training and Inner Circle training, we teach the tonality once their sales structures are written out, where they become so polished and so natural. They are like George Clooney in the film. I mean, it's like a magical, marvelous work and wonder to go from almost a scripted telemarketer to all the way over to this person that just sounds so conversational, but it's such a skilled conversation, taking them through that process with the right questions at the right time. And you can see that prospects just persuading themselves over and over about why they want to change their situation. So tonality is something that is taught. It's not something that you're born with.
Yeah, I agree. And then just last one, like back onto that strategic pausing. It's always done to give someone space to think. How do you pick, like when you're writing scripts, how do you pick where you're putting your pauses from what words you want them thinking of?
Well, I know when we write out sales structures for companies and individual salespeople that are inner circle or advanced inner circle program, like I know where those pauses are going to be. It's always that first problem awareness question.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And it's always in some of your probing questions and your commitment questions and your consequence questions, because those questions pull out more of their emotion because they're more talking about their problems and the root cause of the problems, like how did the problems happen and how are the problems affecting them? So a lot of emotion is drawn out by those problems. And so we're going to pause a lot in those problems. So it's different part of the sales process where we're going to do more of that. We're out of time. We're out of questions. I want to thank everybody. Here was a little bit of a different, I know Matt's on vacation, so James, our CEO, filled in. James, we got to have you on here more. This is pretty good. I mean, you've given Matt some good competition.
Yeah. I've done some solo podcasts on ours this week as well.
You're giving Matt some good competition. So make sure you're tuning in next week as well. We're going to have some different things for you. And if you haven't already joined our Facebook group, Sales Revolution, there should be a link here somewhere. Join us at Sales Revolution. We go live about 4 to 5 times a week with different various trainings on objection handling, committing questions to get them to persuade themselves, how to start the call, how to get rid of sales resistance, take sales pressure out of calls. We work on tonality. There's a lot of little snippets of our training that we'll give away sometimes when we're really nice. We'll give away to you in there. And you can learn more about our training programs in there if you want to learn how to sell a lot more of your products and services. So just go to Sales Revolution Facebook group, click the join button. Once one of our team members lets you in, there'll be like a little 2-question survey. You fill out like what industry you're in, like what do you want to make in that industry, those type of things. So we know you a little bit better, and comment on some of our lives and some of the training, and you're going to sell more. James,
Awesome.
thanks for being on with us today.
Yeah, you'll find that link in the description as well, guys. And thanks for having me, and have a great day.
Now, if you're serious about joining the top 1%, I mean the top 1%, and you want to experience more training content just like this, click the links right over there. Right over there, they're exactly what you need to see next. You see, I release new episodes featuring top salespeople and sales authorities, multiple 6-figure, high 6-figure, even 7-figure earners. And if you're new here, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right below, and join our new Facebook group, Sales Revolution. You see, it's free, and there's a link in the description below just for you. We put it there for you. Finally, I make posts on Facebook and Instagram each and every day with more tips and training. So be sure and follow me and turn on your notifications. So make a comment in the first 7 minutes to any of my latest posts, share this episode, and there's a very real chance that you're going to win some killer prizes. And here's the thing, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be like everyone else. Get into the game. Join the Sales Revolution. Stay active, get involved, learn the right skills, and we will show you how to take your life and income to a level that most only dream about.